Remind America of the fierce urgency of now.
If you're uncomfortable, like a lot of us are, it's time to talk.
It's time to talk.
It's time to talk.
It's time to talk.
Everybody has had a racist interaction here. But those racist interactions are often driven by people's perceptions. And like for me, right, Jewish and white. So people are like, oh, you're really good with money and you probably can't dance. One of those is true. One of them is not. Anyone want to take a guess at which one is and which one isn't?
No, can dance.
You can dance for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that shirt.
All right, let's get off the hook. But Caly, I'd love for you to start this and share with us. You told me a story once that really kind of shook me about when you were younger and you had a swim date at the lake with a girlfriend. So I'd love you to start it, and then we'll just kind of do round robin with, what are the biases or perceptions that you've heard about yourself based on race, similar to what Thavius just said, right? I'm glad for us not be able to speak. So Caly wants to kick it off.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just to preface that with the fact that I grew up in an all-white community. I am biracial. However, everyone in the white community looked at me, Black girl. And so that is what I was. I didn't realize I was different. I didn't realize the color of my skin until the third grade when a boy next to me told me to go clean up his desk. And I'm like, why do you want me to clean up your desk? You're brown. That means you're my slave. That was the first time I realized I was different. It's the first time I went into the girls' bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I'm like, what? And I just started sobbing because I didn't realize I was different. I didn't see it, even though it was right in front of my face every day. So that's sort of, the landscape there. To your point, to what you had referenced, in high school, mind you, I was going to go swimming with one of my girlfriends after school. And I said, hey, so I'm going to go to the lake. We're going to go swimming. Oh, really? And I said, yeah, why? I didn't realize Black people could swim. So that was a big, not anything. They weren't trying to be aggressive. They weren't trying to be, it's just one of those things that people don't know what they don't know. I wasn't upset with that person. I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't mad at her. I was just a little bit confused and floored. We imagine that racism doesn't exist if we don't experience it. And yeah, so that was that. That was that bias that I experienced.
Thank you. Jack, got something to say?
Well, and I'm just the opposite from Allie. I grew up in a mostly Black community. I'm from Flint, Michigan. Just going back to when I first saw racism, even high school, I'd walk home from school with all my friends who were all Black. And in 10th grade, they started letting people in 6 hour for basketball games. And this let maybe one of the only few white people there. I had to wear a hoodie and my boys would walk me home. So I had the reverse of that, which is just heartbreaking. And you don't even realize it's there until something happens to you.
Right. But the bias there, when you did get on the court and this boy could shoot, so.
Oh yeah. But the bias, for sure, is I love to hook it up.
So this white boy can jump is what you're telling me.
Well, you used to, at least. Anyway, they're like, oh, Larry Bird. I'm like, no more, like Isaiah. But for sure,
the biases are all around us, for sure.
Definitely. Dela?
I think for me, as a Middle Eastern woman, I don't necessarily look like I am. I don't bleach my hair to be white passing. it's definitely not my intention. My own family just tells me I don't look really good as a brunette. But, you know, I don't fit any of the norms. My hair is chopped and I'm tatted and pierced, and it doesn't necessarily go along with sort of the expectations or the stereotypes of our region. And when I sort of tell people in the north of Iran, we have blonde, blue-eyed people, and in the south, we're kissing Africa, and we have folks in my family and other people there who are Black, who are mixed, who we have a lot of diversity in Iran, but just the majority of us in the middle kind of look the same. And so a lot of the stereotypes are sort of that I break it or I don't fit into it properly. And then as someone who emigrated here and learned how to speak English in the US and kind of went through the true immigrant struggle, and culturally was brought up very traditionally in a lot of senses. But then I get biased from the other side that I'm not quite an immigrant enough. I don't have an accent. I don't have the struggle. I've been trolled about that. It's sort of kind of a weird space for me because I guess for Iranians, if I don't have a hookah in my hand and if I'm, not doing things I'm supposed to do there, then I don't make sense. And then, so it's weird. I kind of get a weird bias from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Tough space to be in too, right? Because especially probably as a child, it's kind of like, where do I fit? And so I'm sure that's probably tough. Thavius?
I mean, there's been numerous biases that I've dealt with just from the whole idea of like, all right, a Black man should be able to play basketball and should be able to dance and you should be able to, whatever, right? Like, and I don't play basketball. I've never played basketball. I played football for a little bit just because I was bigger than everybody in school. But it's funny because, it's not really funny, but it's funny to me because I can't sit here and be sad about like every single, someone else misconstruing something. So I can sit back and laugh at it. There was an instance where, I'm involved in music and technology. I'm a certified trainer of this program called Ableton Live. And there was a while when I was yearly going to this thing called NAMM, this big music convention that happens in Anaheim. And at one point, the company Ableton had partnered up with another company, a DJ company called Serato, and they were going to do like this like basketball thing, right? Ableton was going to play Serato in this basketball game. And I was brought on because I was volunteering for some workshop at NAMM. And long story short, right? This is in LA. I lived in LA for 20 years, big, huge Kobe Bryant fan, love the Lakers. I don't play basketball, right? They didn't know this though. So they assumed that me being the only Black person involved in this whole sporting event was the best basketball player. And they got these like custom made jerseys and they gave me number 8 for Kobe, right? And they really thought I was just going to ball. They thought I was going to like just save the Ableton team. And I did score the first 2 points and then I subbed myself out because back then I was smoking cigarettes and I was in just bad shape. So. But it's just one of those things where it's like, people are so quick to run with these biases without ever like even asking if it's true. You know what I mean? It's a thing where it's like, they don't assume that you're going to be offended because of course you can play basketball. Like it would be offensive for me to even assume that you can't because all Black people play basketball, right? Don't you? I saw some Black people down the street playing basketball. Clearly you can do that, right? So it's just one of those things where it's like, to Dela's point, and AJ, I'm sure you have a similar kind of experience. I'm sure a lot of people do, where it's like, if you don't fit into the grand scheme of what people expect, whether it's people outside of your collective, peoples or people inside of that community, it's weird. And when you have to kind of toe this fine line because you're not quite like other enough and you're not quite included enough, it creates a really, really weird space, and I'd imagine like that's probably a common thread here on this panel because, I don't know, the idea of even being, quote unquote successful is frowned upon in some ways because if you do that and it seems like you're like not as whatever, right? Not as hood or as down or as like entrenched in whatever is preventing everyone else from being successful or whatever that is. It's like, it's almost like you have to feel guilty for that in some way, and to me, that's kind of the biggest bias ultimately is like having to deal with people thinking that like, because you talk or act a certain way that you're not like down for the cause, that you don't represent, you're not like, that you're a sellout, that you're too white, that you're too this, that you don't embrace whatever. So that's a bias that I get once people actually like sit down and open up to me, but don't really know me, right? If there's a superficial relationship that has no like depth to it, and I'm speaking to somebody and I'm like breaking down something or talking about some outline, then they may not realize that, like, yeah, I grew up I spent a lot of time in South Central LA, sleeping on the couch, eating donut balls, making beats, smoking blunts, like, you know, in the hood, like working with people, not because I chose to, that was just the circumstances I ended up with. And I guess that gives me validity, right? But like, you shouldn't have to like struggle to have certain people not apply that bias to you, right? To like, so that's the weird thing for me when you talk about bias. There's like superficial biases that I could talk about, like the basketball thing. That's like a funny haha whatever. But there's been a lot of times when the flip side of it is like I walk into a room and it's like, oh, okay, you're playing some white boy music, or you sound like blah 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 blah, or you're not hood enough, or you're not down enough. And it's really unfortunate because little do a lot of people know, like I've probably been through a lot more black type whatever, you know, if it's going to be phrased like that, then they'd be willing to give credit for it. But I shouldn't have to wave some flag to meet somebody's bias right before it hits me. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I feel it's complete. So
that bias comes from a lack of knowledge. You know, that's why people have those biases. Like in Allie's case, oh, I didn't know black people swam. Why? Because you've never seen a black person in a pool or a lake, so you assume that they don't swim. I think it's just really, quite frankly, ignorance in many cases. So AJ, let's wrap this up with you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it all is based solely on ignorance. I mean, maybe just due to the fact that I am someone that I would never just say something that I feel is just overtly offensive to someone because I think it's a joke based off of a stereotype that I've heard. And so for people to feel so free to be able to do those with, you know, people of color, Black individuals, it just, to me, it just seems like it's ingrained and it's rooted a lot deeper than just surface level of this is just a joke, right? This is a stereotype. All Black people like watermelon. All Black people like fried chicken. And, you know, first of all, my thing is like, who doesn't like watermelon, right? Who doesn't like fried chicken? Like, well, you're just trying to like stab this at one individual is really interesting. But for me personally, you know, it comes down to, again, being articulate, being well-spoken. A lot of people seem to be surprised when they hear me speak. At times I've been told I sound white, right? You sound white, which is effectively saying you don't, so because you sound educated, you sound white. And in my opinion, right? So they're saying the ignorance that's coming out is Black people are not educated. Black people shouldn't sound like that. Therefore, you sound white, right? That is the stereotype. That is the bias that they're in reality laying out. And for me, you know, I just think that there's been many times when I've even been just approached that way. I grew up in a suburban area, so I've been around a lot of white people. But where I'm from, I've been around a lot of different people of all ethnicities, of all cultures. And I feel like I respected everyone. But, you know, I remember this one instance in college so well, where I played softball at LSU, and, you know, we had this study hall where all the athletes go, and I'm friends with a lot of the baseball players. And there's one baseball player that I hadn't met before, and he sees me and he immediately goes, "Oh, hey, Shaniqua," like just trying to talk ghetto, quote unquote, right? Trying to be loud because his perception of me, because I'm Black, is that is how I talk. That is how I'm going to react. And that's going to be our interaction. And I remember just sitting there saying, my name's AJ. This is how I speak. So you can speak to me normally, especially since I never met you. Right. I mean, I was immediately understood what was taking place, the microaggression that he was laying out on the table. And, you know, I think that those are the biases that you see often, right? Where if you speak well, and in my opinion, it's like if you can speak full sentence, some individuals think that you're speaking white, right? Or if you don't have a certain tone to your voice, or if you are just not someone that's extremely loud or quote unquote ghetto to what they expect you to sound like, that's definitely what you hear or what I've heard a lot in my life. You know, and I just think that, you know, this can go even deeper into systematic racism, but I feel as if where I've been told often, "Oh, AJ, you're pretty for a Black girl. Oh, you're pretty for a Black girl." Right. And not just pretty. And what's so interesting about that is that it wasn't until probably my senior year in high school, or maybe even freshman year of college, where a friend of mine, I think he had heard someone say that to me, and he's like, does that piss you off when people ask you that? And I just heard it so much in my life that I had never really sat back and thought like, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. That is actually an insult. That's not a compliment to say that I'm pretty for a Black girl, instead of just saying that I'm just a pretty girl. And, you know, to have to sit and think about how indoctrined it is that dark skin is just not beautiful, smart, educated, articulate, right? All these things that are, these stigmas are attached to having a darker pigment in your skin color. And it's what I've, and all of us obviously have had to face with stereotypes and biases our entire life. And it's solely due to our ignorance.
I agree. And kudos to you for standing up and saying, hey, my name is AJ, this is how I speak. And this
It's quite funny because I was just like, no, sir, I know what you're doing. I don't know.
That respect, because that was just back. So I love that.
America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.